I'd like to tell you a story. It's about a guy and a car. Yeah, you already know where this is going because you've read the description. So, yesterday there was a classic car meetup just a couple miles down the road, and whilst I've said before I'm not really one of these classic car meetup sort of guys, we had nothing else on, me and the missus. We thought we'll go down, we'll have a look, spend an hour, you know, see what's what, have a look at the cars, usual stuff. It's hot at the moment. I'm sure it's hot everywhere, wherever you are it's probably hot as well, but for us down here in the southwest it's very hot. We don't normally see temperatures exceeding 25 degrees, and at the moment it's probably closer to 35 degrees. We haven't had rain for about 8 weeks, so it's very hot, very dry, and I was a little bit nervous about taking the car out in that sort of heat, but I thought, you know, if you don't try you never know, do you? So we went down, no problem. Car was running a little bit on the hot side, just past the middle, you know, maybe 3/4 of the way up, not too bad I thought. Fan's doing its job. Parked up, went around the car show, spent an hour, not really my bag if I'm honest. Way too hot, standing in a field, sun beating down on your head, lots of old people, you know how it is. Left again, had to queue up to get out because there's lots of cars coming in and out on the old car, you know, just getting warm. Spitfires don't like fields either. You ever driven a Spitfire off-road? Don't. The suspension is not good. Drove her home. Again, she's on the hot side. Not too worried. Now I'm noticing when I pull up to a junction, the idle's dropping off. She's going down to like 300 RPM. But I'm having to keep my foot on the gas a little bit, feather it a little bit just to keep the engine running. I boot it home as fast as I can. And these people not know I'm trying to film a video. Boot it home as fast as I can. Put the car away, think no more of it. I let her cool down, I go inside for an hour, have some lunch, I think I'll come back out and just check her over and make sure everything's okay. First thing I do is pop off the radiator cap just to make sure the water level is up to the top. And I see the dreaded chocolate milkshake. And I think, oh no. Pop the oil filler cap off. Same thing inside the valve cover. Pull the valve cover off. I've just showed you what the valve cover looks like. It's clearly got water in the oil and oil in the water, which can only really mean one thing, can't it? Head gasket time. So I'm not really too sure why this happened. As I say, the car did get hot. Not overly hot. It wasn't boiling. There was no steam coming out of the bonnet. Other than the low idle, it drove absolutely fine, full power, no real sort of issues. But clearly something's gone on. I need to pull the head and investigate the gasket. The new fan I've put on, is it doing its job properly? Do I need to go back to the old one? I don't know. I need to make sure the fan still works for a start. I assumed it was working. I had my dummy switch on, but of course that doesn't mean to say it was working, so I need to check that. And I'm thinking what I might do, rather than pull all that new electric fan gubbins off, I may just put the old fan back on as well. One thing I did notice when I was taking the engine apart was that the everything was hot. As you'd imagine, being under a bonnet on a hot day with a hot engine, everything was very hot. Even the dash pots on the carbs were hot. Everything, even after an hour of being inside, everything was hot to the touch. So that doesn't fill me full of confidence. Now, I know obviously I've put the electric fan in the front of the radiator on this one, but I'm thinking with the old mechanical fan being in there, that mechanical fan, as well as obviously pulling air through the radiator, it also blows air back over the carbs, the valves, the whole thing, which the fan on the front of the radiator doesn't really do. So I may go back to the old fan. I need to sort of investigate and find out what's gone on really. Has the head gasket blown or something terrible happened? I don't know. I'm going to have to pull the head off and have a look. And as you can see, I've already started. So we've pulled the carbs off. Got some of those new air filters, by the way, the pancake air filters, just because they look nice and the old ones are a bit grooted. So pulled the carbs off, vacuum hoses. Obviously this is the inside of the valve cover. As you can see, there is water and oil mix in there, quite clearly. Inlet manifolds come off. Just now got that off. Looks exactly how you'd expect an inlet manifold to look. Nothing in that. Inside on the valve assembly doesn't actually look too bad, to be honest. Obviously we've, you know, clearly got some bog in there from somewhere. but it doesn't look too bad. I've drained the radiator, as you can see. Most of it's now on the floor because I'm damned if I can ever find a way of draining these properly. That's the coolant that's in the bucket. It doesn't look terrible, I'll be honest. I can't really see any oil in that, but clearly there is in there somewhere. I imagine the oil probably gets picked up and floats to the top of the radiator, so that's going to need flushing through. So next job is, we've got most of this off now. I'm going to leave the water pump attached to the head because there's no reason that needs to come off. I need to undo some of my water lines down here. That one can get pulled off. Finish pulling that stud out. Unbolt the exhaust manifold. I'm not going to take it off because I don't want to have to unbolt it down the exhaust, because you know what these things are like to unbolt. So I'm just going to sort of leave that where it is, sort of sticking up in the air. Pull the plugs out. We'll have a look at those. And then we'll take the rocker assembly off. Obviously valves will stay inside the head. Pop the rocker assembly off. Pull the head bolts off, and then we'll get in underneath and we'll have a look at that head gasket and see what's happened. I don't know, to be honest. I've done a bit of sort of reading, as you do when these things happen. And obviously there's lots of cause of head gasket failures. You know, it could be crack blocks. I mean, there could be, you know, until you get in and have a look, it could be anything really. I don't know. I suspect that it's just got overly hot for whatever reason, and that the water has started to boil essentially, and it's sort of pushed its way through the gasket somehow just due to the high pressure. That's what I'm guessing. I don't know. The gasket may have broken. I don't know. I don't want to sort of. That's what I'm hoping. Let's put it that way. Because if that's the case, then my head gasket should look fine. The head should look fine. Piston should be fine, etc. Could it be burning lean, burning hot? Maybe. It's quite hard to tell with that a mixture thing. As I say, the car drives perfectly. I've been driving it every day for 3 months, 6 months. It's my new daily driver. I drive it every day. So, and it's been performing fine. Temperatures have been stable. No issues there whatsoever. So I don't know. Let's just quickly check to make sure that fan is actually working, because, you know, if the fan for some reason didn't work yesterday, it wasn't running, then that would be bad, wouldn't it? So let's just fire the old ignition up. Hit my dummy switch. Turn my blower off, forgot about that. Switch on. Yeah, she's definitely running. So clearly the fan was running yesterday, because I had the dummy switch on inside just in case, just so I knew, peace of mind, that's why I put it there, that it was running. So the fan was running. So what call? I don't know. Let's just tear into it. I'll get that far, we'll pick it up, and we'll see what the crack is. I mean, you know, the work's never done when you've got a classic car, is it? Just when you think it's done, something else will pop up. But I am suspicious of that fan. Maybe that fan just wasn't cooling it enough. As I say, it is very, very hot at the moment. But clearly people run these cars in hotter climates than I do. If you live in California or wherever, or anywhere hot, clearly they work. You know, the cooling system is there for a reason, to do its job. And yes, they'll run hotter in a hot climate. But they shouldn't run hot enough to make you blow a head gasket. Don't know. Let's have a look. Pulling ahead in this temperature is fun. I'll spare you having to look at my sweaty, naked torso. God, sweat in my eyes. Jesus Christ. Right, let's have a look. Heads off. Okay, head and water pump intact. I thought, you know what, I'll just pull it all at the same time. Seems the easiest thing to do. I can take the water pump off later on. Valves look okay. I know you can't see them very well, but there's nothing amiss there. However, boom! I got a little swimming pool in all of my cylinders. How did that happen? I can't see any obvious breaks in the gasket between the cylinders. Okay, so we've cleaned it all up, mopped the water out. I think the water in the cylinders was just when I pulled the head off. I think all the water in the head just flew into the cylinders. The head itself appears to be in good condition. There's no cracks. There's a little mark here, but that's a casting mark. There's one on the other side as well. Yeah, no cracks, splits in between the cylinders or anything like that. So I don't think the head's at fault. I think I found the problem. I'll show you the gasket. Our first inspection, I thought the gasket looked alright. And then I spotted this. See that burn mark? And if I hold it up to something where you can see the light, there we go. Those two holes burnt through it, and I think that is our suspect. And that's a bit weird because you've got one in this, one in that corner and one in that corner. But the weird thing is when you look at the block and you look at your water channels, you've got a water channel there and another one there, but you don't. Oops, I just dropped a spanner into a bucket of coolant. But you don't. Oh, for God's sake! Come on. But you don't have the corresponding holes in the gasket. You can see there's that hole, but then you've got that hole, no hole in that corner. And if you look on the other side, you can see the impression there where it's been pushed down into that hole. But no hole itself, which is weird. I'm sure it's the right gasket, but why is there not a hole in the gasket where there's a water channel? Now, when I pulled the head bolts out, I noticed that whilst they were tight, they weren't mega tight. Now, I'll be honest here and say that when I put that head on, I didn't have a torque wrench. I know, shock horror. Didn't have a torque wrench. I just did it until it was tight, like elbow tight, if you know what I mean. And I went round them in the right order, tightened all the bolts down, and as I say, I've been driving it for the last 3 to 6 months absolutely fine. So clearly I wasn't that far out, but it may well be that it just wasn't torqued down quite enough in that corner, and that has caused the fire there in number 4 to creep around that fire ring and then burn those two holes into the water channel. And of course, once you've got any kind of crack gap in it, because it's a pressurized system, water's going to start getting into your oil's going to start getting into your water, and you have yourself a failure. So I don't think the water in the cylinders was anything due to this. I think that was just due to me pulling the head off and wiggling it around and having water fall out of it. So it should be a simple question of buying a new gasket, making sure she's torqued down properly this time. I will actually go and get a torque wrench because I don't own one. I borrowed one, but I don't own one, which is again a bit embarrassing to say, but you know, there we go, live and learn. Okay, it's the next day, so we've given our cylinders a good clean out, squirted some oil into them, and if we just quick turn by hand, they're all running absolutely fine. Like I said before, the water that was in the cylinders yesterday, I am convinced that water was not there when I was driving. Because, let's face it, if you've got that much water in your cylinders when the engine running, it's going to go bang. You can't compress the water. It's either going to blow it out of the exhaust, you're going to get steam, smoke, or the engine's just going to go bang because it can't obviously compress water. So I am 100% convinced the water that was in there was just as a result of me pulling the head off and all the water that was in the head dropping down into the cylinders when I did it. Because as I say, when I drove back yesterday, or whenever it was, a few days ago, the car drove absolutely fine. Other than low idle and wanting to sort of and quit and die, when it was under load, power-wise, no problem at all. No smoke, no adverse performance, nothing. I didn't even know there was an issue with the head gasket until I came in and just pulled the cap off to check the water level, and then obviously saw the chocolate milkshake. So I think basically I called it just about in time. So I've ordered a new set of gaskets. They're going to take a few days. For you, it will be in a bit. And in the meantime, we're just going to give it a quick clean up, see if we can get some of the water actually out of the block, because here's the problem with the block. Whilst obviously you can get the oil out, you pull the sump off, obviously everything that's inside the crankcase falls out. With the water, not so much. I don't think there's any specific drain plugs on this block to get the water out that I'm aware of. I could be wrong, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. The only drain plug I found was this chap here on the block. Now I pulled the bolt out of that, which is this little chap, brass bolt. Pulled him out, nothing came out, so I started poking around in it with a bit of metal, and I got some gunge out of it, and I can see there, I've just come back from work and I can see that something has been dripping out whilst I've been gone. So that's good news. So I'm taking a little bit of metal and we're just getting in there and giving it a good root around, seeing if we can get any sludge out. And hopefully, I'd like to think that's the lowest level that the water can go, but I'm not too sure, because at the end of the day I've still got water in the water channels. Should have tried to catch it, but forgot. Now these two holes, I wonder they don't have holes in the gasket for them. They're not actually holes, they don't go down. That only goes down, well, a few mil. Oh, and you can see right at the very bottom there of the water, we've got some crud in it, which is good. But not much oil came out, that's just rusty water from the bottom of the block. Hardly any oil came out, which again is good news. Because again it's a water channel, so you don't want oil in it. But that seems to have emptied that block out quite nicely for the moment. Okay. Right, a couple of days later, we got ourselves a pack of gaskets. Good value, 15 quid. Whilst they're not going to be the best quality ones in the world, I'm sure you can get better. For 15 quid, that's not bad. That's all your exhaust gaskets, all your carbs, water pump housing, exhaust and inlet manifold, rocker cover, and obviously your head gasket in the back there. So 15 quid, can't really grumble. Also, I'm sure you know guys, but when you're taking your push rods out for your rockers, make sure you number them. They naturally, not machine themselves, but you know, they naturally make their own grooves, so you want to keep them as they were. Rocker cover is all scrubbed out. Got rid of any of the old crap in there. She's good to go. Just stop. There's no need for it. Inlet manifold all looks good. They're very rough on the inside. I see why people, you know, I know they talk about knifing the inlet ports. Not that you can see them, but also just getting in there with a whirly wheel and cleaning up the casting. I'm guessing these are all sand casted. And that's why they've got that finish on them. If I cared enough, I'd get in there and clean it up, but I don't. But what I am going to do, now I've got a new water pump housing gasket, that's this sort of triangulated thing in the back, which is your gasket for your water pump, where your water pump meets the block. Now if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know I had some leaking issues coming from there. Well, I think I had some leaking issues coming from there. A couple of videos back, you remember one of my core plugs was rotten, which involved taking the whole front of the engine off to get to it. Now at the time, before I twigged it was the core plug, I thought it was that water pump housing, the gasket between the two, that kept going, because I could all see water dripping down the block and I just couldn't figure it out. But I couldn't actually see it dripping from there, I could see it coming from somewhere in behind there. So I think all my messing around with that was completely unfounded, because I think overall it was the core plug all along. I don't think it was actually that gasket. So I don't need to be quite as, you know, thorough. I'm going to be thorough, but not quite as thorough with it. I've got a new set of bolts for that as well, because I managed to snap one. Because I was doing them, obviously when you think something's leaking, you get in there and you start cranking the bolts up, so, and I snapped one. Managed to get that out of the head, so I got some spare bolts for that. So now I suppose would be a good time to actually take that water pump off, clean the surfaces, put a new gasket on, bit of sealant between the two, clamp her back up, and then put the head back on with a fresh gasket on the water pump. That would make sense, right? Well, while you're here, one of those jobs while you're here, you may as well do it. If you didn't watch that previous video, I'll just back it up for you a little bit. The core plug, you can just see the corner of it there poking out behind. See that plug? That one in there. That is a circular plug in behind there that for some reason isn't actually covered by the engine plate. This is the engine plate, which has the engine mounts attached to it, one on either side. It's just a flat plate with engine mounts, and then obviously you have your timing chain underneath the cover here. All that's obviously got to come off, pulley's got to come off, timing chain cover, timing chain and the gears, just to get to that core plug in behind. The core plug is one of these chaps. It is just a metal plug that is drifted into the block, hammered in flush, and they are there. So if you live in a cold climate and your engine freezes because you haven't got the proper coolant or anything in it, the idea is it just pushes those plugs out when the water expands rather than cracking your block. That's one of the reasons why you want coolant in your water rather than just water. So one reason is obviously it stops the block from rusting out as much. If you just have water in a cast iron block sloshing around all the time, obviously that cast iron is going to rust. That's what happens with iron and water, right? Iron oxide. So rusting inside your block, bad. So that's one reason why you have coolant. The other one is for that reason. The glycerine in the coolant stops the water from freezing as well. Helps it transfer heat better and also stops it freezing should you live somewhere where you get freezing. Where we live in the southwest, we very, very rarely get anything freezing at all. Never cold enough to actually freeze the water inside your block, even if your car was outside. We don't get that cold. We maybe get a week of cold freezing weather a year, maybe a bit of snow, sleet, hail, some ice outside, but very, very rarely we get more than about a week of that. Again, we're right down in the southwest in the Gulf Stream, so we tend to get warm, wet weather brought across the Atlantic. And the weather's changed, so after the last couple of weeks of obscene heat, today it's actually raining for the first time, which is really good. It's nice to see a bit of rain. It's not raining heavily yet, there's been some flash flooding, but we have got some rain, which is great for the countryside. I worry about the little furry things out there, like the squirrels and things, you know. I leave water out for the squirrels. I go cycling down to the woods probably 2-3 times a week, and I take some nuts down me and feed the squirrels. Very off topic with this, I know. But as I say, very off topic, I know, but you know, I'll worry about things like that, you know. I'm a lover. I'll always rescue creatures if I see them, whether it's a wasp stuck in a pot of water somewhere. I'll always fish them out and rescue them, especially bees, because if you can, why wouldn't you? If you can rescue something, if you can save something's life, regardless whether it's a bug or a little critter or a little woodlouse stuck in a, you know, in a trough of water, flip it out. Why wouldn't you? It's no skin off my nose, and to them it's their life back. Whew, that escalated quickly, didn't it? Right, she's back on, torqued up. The bottom of the head is clean. Clean as it's going to get. There's nothing bad in there. New gasket's on. Just make sure I torque this one down properly, eh? I'm assuming that was what the problem was, just me not retorquing it when it was hot. Did I use a torque wrench last time? I think I did, but I don't remember doing it. That doesn't mean I didn't. I did have a torque wrench here, but I don't remember using a torque wrench. But I like to think I did, but I don't know. So if I didn't, it's on me, isn't it? I know you've got to torque it down cold and then run it and then torque it down again hot. So that's what I need to do this time, and I definitely didn't torque it down again when it was hot. That much I do know. I just put it together and then spent so long messing around with the engine and the carbs, you know, trying to tune it and get it running right and the mixture and all that kind of jazz, that I just never thought about retorquing the head again. Completely honestly, I just didn't think about it. And I think what's happened is obviously it hasn't been torqued down enough, and then the hot weather we had just meant that any weakness between that gasket and that head, any slight looseness if you like, and then running it hot just had the water just going underneath that gasket a little bit, just enough that I could see it in the oil. It's the only thing I can think of. If we look at the old gasket, so we'll just take a minute and look at this. I'll put it over here so we can actually see it on the car. That hole I said about before, I know I went through this yesterday, but that hole I said about before, that hole doesn't cover anything. That's a blind hole underneath there, so those two little holes don't mean anything. All of the water galleries, whatever they're called, I looked at, all these are all nicely indented, meaning that nothing's gone out around those. You can see some blow by between the cylinders. You can see the darkness there between the cylinders, means we've had some burning between the cylinders. That also would indicate the head gasket wasn't torqued down enough, because obviously you shouldn't get any fire between those rings. And all the other impressions for all the oil galleries and everything look okay, so I can't see any point of failure on this. I can't see any point of failure on the block or on the head. So I'm just going to rebuild it with a new gasket. Make sure I use a torque wrench, torque it down properly, torque it down again when it's hot. And if anything happens again, then I think we'll have to suspect the head maybe not being perfectly straight. I've put a straight edge on the head, looks straight to me. And again, the car's been running perfectly, driving every day for the last 6 months or so. Would it have got hot enough to warp the head? I don't think so. But I don't know. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a mechanic, I don't know. For the sake of a £15 gasket set, and obviously the cost of the oil and the water and the coolant, I'm just going to put it back together again and just see how it goes, and just keep an eye on it. And if anything goes again in future, then obviously we've got other problems. Okay, well that wasn't too bad. She just slide back into place. I've done the bolts up just finger tight for the minute. I need to borrow a torque wrench. Yes, I'm going to use a torque wrench this time, obviously. So I've just done them finger tight for the moment, and I'll come back and torque them in the correct pattern with the torque proper settings, wherever they are. Do that. Manifold's back on. I'll put the thermostat back on, so she's good to go. Hoses, blah 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 blah, all the other stuff. But for the time being, that's enough. Right, head's now torqued up, rocker assembly's on, a little bit of oil, plugs are back in, TDC on number 1, both valves closed, and you can probably see the timing mark on the pulley. So we know we're at top dead centre, and we know we're at top dead centre compression stroke because both number 1 valves are closed, and we can see there number 6 is open. So we know it's the compression stroke, so then we know we can put our first plug lead. Rotor arm is pointing this way, which means this needs to be our number 1 plug lead, and our firing order is 1, 3, 4, 2. So 1, 3, 4, 2. So that's torqued down. Now, one point to note with the torque specs, in the book it calls for 46 foot-pounds of torque for the head bolts, which seems really low to me. But I'm not going to second guess a Haynes manual, right? You know, here's me, rebuilt one car, it's going to second guess a Haynes manual. My torque wrench starts at 50. So I've had to do it to the minimum setting on my torque wrench, which is 50. So hopefully the extra 4 foot-pounds isn't going to cause a problem. And this may be where I went wrong last time, because I'm pretty sure last time if I had used a torque wrench, I would have realised that my torque wrench didn't go down as low as 46, I only stopped at 50. Which makes me think I didn't use a torque wrench last time. I know, right? Live and learn, as they say. So I think it's possible to over-torque a head. And I think that's maybe what I did last time. Maybe I've over-torqued it. because obviously the head gasket is metal with some kind of material in the middle. You know, it compresses, it squeezes in there. So maybe that was the problem last time, over compression. I don't know. We're not going to know until we just blast it and run it around and all the rest of it. So that's all the sort of ignition side of it done, if you like. Valves are all good. I've gone run and checked the valve lash, make sure nothing's changed. We've got a tiny bit of lash on those valves, which is what you want. None of them are flapping in the breeze, so that's fine. If anything, that one feels a little bit tight, but we can look at that later. So now I'm going to connect up all the water system, all the hoses before I forget, and then it'll be a case of exhaust manifold back on, inlet manifold on, do your bolts up, carbs on, fuel back in, and then there's no reason we can't fire it up and see what happens. I've got no reason to think it won't run. It ran perfectly fine before, but of course you never know, do you? And then what we'll do is we'll run it for a while, assuming it starts and runs. We'll run it for a while, get all the oil nice and warm. We're just going to put water in the radiator for the time being. I'm going to get some radiator flush and probably get some engine flush at the same time, because obviously there is going to be some oil in the water and vice versa inside the block, which I can't get to. It just will be. It'll be in there somewhere. So we'll get some radiator flush, we'll get some engine flush, we'll run it through, we'll get it nice and warm, we'll drop the oil, we'll get the engine flush in it, we'll blast that through, and then we'll put a fresh oil, fresh filter in there, and then we can run the water through, clean that out, radiator flush, and then backfill it with the proper coolant. And that should mean that any of the nasty stuff in there, where the two have gone and combined, should all be out. I don't think you're going to get all of it out. I don't think it'll be uncommon after a head gasket failure to notice a tiny bit of oil in the water, or you know, vice versa. So I'm not going to get in a twist if I do spot anything, but you know, there shouldn't be anything major going on in there. So we can put the old rocker cover back on. She's been cleaned out. Get in there with some of the old engine degreaser and just zapped it all over. Got in underneath the baffle there, let it slosh around. It's been stood up overnight. So we'll get that back on now she's clean. Nothing wrong with that quart gasket, so we're just going to reuse that gasket. Again, nothing wrong with that at all. Got a spare one in case we need it. And then go back, carbs, heat shield. Well, that was a nightmare. These manifold bolts, my good God. They are such a bastard to get in. You think coming out, put them back in, easy, right? No. No. For some reason, this one has decided to strip itself. I don't know why. It's the same nut as I've used on all of them. It's the same nut that came off. But this time when it went back on, it just launched all the threads. All the threads. To the point now where I can't get one on it. And that stud is absolutely, let's get this hose out of the way, get that off, come on, and that stud is absolutely rock hard in the head now. As you can see, I've had a pair of grips on it trying to get it out. Nope, no, she's in there good and tight. Which only really leaves me with an option. As you can see, I've already shaved this down a little bit. The idea being if I can get that a bit further onto that stud, I might be able to get to the semi-good threads, which are still on there. But I don't want to take too much off this. I may have to, because I can't get that stud out. The other option is I run a tap down that. Not that I can, because now the inlet manifold's in the way. So no, actually forget that. Run a tap down it and put some new threads onto it. That's not going to work. Without taking either the bolt out, which I can't get out, or taking all the manifolds off again, which I'm just not going to do, because it's taken me hours to get them back on. The other option, of course, is that I just leave that stud off, because at the end of the day, you've got 3 more studs along the top. You've got a stud in that bottom corner there. You can see where I've had to cut the hanger off in the past. And you've obviously got another stud in there, and another one in there, and another one in the corner there. So there are plenty of studs on it. Am I going to get a manifold leak, exhaust or inlet manifold, by not having a stud on that corner? I don't know. I mean, it's on there absolutely rock tight. I don't think I'm going to get a leak from that. Not with a stud there and a stud up there. Those two studs are like, what, 6 inches apart? Surely not. I mean, I suppose I can just run it and find out, can't I? Leave that one off for the time being, put everything back on, put the carbs on, get it fired up, and see if I get any leakage around there. I can test for inlet leaks with a bit of brake cleaner. If I get rough idle, exhaust leak should be quite apparent because you'll have exhaust gases coming out. I'm just going to leave it. I can't. It's just such a dog to get out, and obviously trying to line all those manifolds up to put them back in again. Both manifolds go in at the same time. Those little butterfly holders, whatever they're called, they grip onto both the exhaust and the inlet manifold. And of course, I've still got the actual exhaust pipe connected to the exhaust manifold, because trying to get those 3 studs out to the exhaust downpipe, damn near impossible. Obviously they get hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, and they just basically weld themselves together. So I try and get those studs out just to take the pressure off and let the exhaust go down. It's going to snap. So what I'm trying to do now is hold the exhaust manifold up with the exhaust trying to pull it down, and the inlet manifold, and get the bolt in finger tight so I can get a ratchet on it, and try and keep the little butterfly from walking side to side so that it grips onto both sides of the manifold properly. It's a nightmare. But all the other bolts are in and all the bolts are tight, so in my mind I'm just going to say that one's done for the minute, and if I get any problems later on I'll come back and revisit that bolt and see if I can get it out with something else, maybe cut a slot into it and try and get it out that way or something, I don't know. But as I say, I've been doing it for hours and I just can't be bothered anymore. I've just lost the will to live with it. All I want to do now is get all the carbs back together, all the hoses back on, and just get this thing back to life again. Everything else has been reasonably plain sailing. Head came off alright, gone back on alright, torqued up to the specs, rocker arm, blah blah blah, radiator, la la la. You know the drill. So yeah, let's just not drive ourselves mad. Let's just get the carbs back on, get all the linkages, all the hoses done up tight, and see if she fires up. Sounds like a plan. Bit of smoke coming off the old manifolds there, but it's to be expected. I've had stuff, I've been spraying stuff, so expect that. Well, the last bit is pretty straightforward. Manifold, as soon as you get the manifolds on, the rest of it is, you know, pretty straightforward. Bolt your carbs back on, reconnect your fuel lines, put your vacuum lines back on, you know, and that's it. So at the moment we're just running it with the old oil for the time being. All the oil was getting dropped anyway in the filter, so I'm just firing her up just to make sure she fires up, and she runs, and she does, so that's good. Yeah, so I guess tomorrow I'm going to have to head down to the auto store, engine flush, fresh oil, radiator flush, fresh coolant, new oil filter, and that should be it, other than a bedding in period. May have to look at the timing, etc., but I can't see why I should. You know, none of the ignition side of it has changed at all, but I don't know. Like I say, I think what we'll do tomorrow, we'll get it up to temperature. It's only been running for 2 or 3 minutes. So tomorrow I'll get on my new stuff, we'll get her up to temperature, we'll get her warm, then obviously we can drop the oil out. Always drop the oil when it's warm, obviously. Gives a chance to circulate, pick up all the crap in there. When it's warm, it'll all drop down into the sump, and then we can get rid of all that. Flush the radiator through a few times, water pump spinning, fresh water in, blast it out. And like I say, get it warm, give it a chance to cook all the old crap off the block. Like I say, all the old oil and stuff on there. Again, we are running it without that manifold stud in the corner there for the moment, but I'm hoping that isn't going to make any difference. If it is, then obviously it's going to be a bit of a pig, but you know, whatever. But I'm hoping it's not going to make any difference. Yeah. But she starts and she runs. I know it was starting and running before, but you know, whenever you take an engine apart and put it back together again, when it starts and runs, it's always a bit like... Right. It's good, I suppose, isn't it? It's good, right? Still sounds a little bit chuggy, but you know, when you rev it and give it the beans, she's a bit reluctant, but it's going to take a while for the fuel pots to fill up again, that kind of thing. I've only given them a squirt in each of the fuel pots. It's going to take a while to build pressure in there. Blah, blah, blah. Right. Right. She's warm, up to temperature. We've dropped the oil out. Unfortunately, when I say I've dropped the oil out, I've had to drill a hole in the sump because that sump plug will not move. I have tried everything. And there we are on the ramps in our amazing space. Yeah, that sump plug wouldn't move. I put a spanner on it. It's a square plug, put a spanner on it, as you do. Found the right one. 7/16, something like that. Wouldn't move. 2 spanners joined together, the old double spanner trick. Wouldn't move. Spanner on, hitting it with a lump hammer. Wouldn't move. Tried an 8-point socket on it. Wouldn't move. Jumbo pair of mole grips and a mallet. Wouldn't move. It's almost like it's welded in there. Nothing I can do will get that sump plug out, and now it's more chewed up than, you know. So I wanted to get all the oil out. I put some engine flush in, so we used a bit of the old Wins engine flush. No idea if it was any good or not. Sling it in the oil. Then we used a bit of the radiator flush as well. So that goes in the radiator, that goes in your engine. You run it up to temperature and let it do its job. 10-15 minutes, let it circulate through the engine, picks up all the crap, brings it down into the sump. Got the car up on the ramps and I'm there underneath wailing away for half an hour with all manner of things trying to get that plug out, and it will not come out. And by now, of course, the oil is cooling down and thickening up, which I don't want. So I thought, I don't see what choice I've got. If I had any sense, I would, well, original plan was to drill a hole through the middle of the sump bolt and then actually tap into that, but you can't get to it. The sump bolt is up level with the cross member, so you can't get a drill onto it. And obviously sumps aren't very thick, so I had to put a drill through the sump just to get all, I wanted it all out, all the water, all the engine flush, the oil, I wanted the whole thing out, so I thought, bollocks to it, I'm just going to drill a hole in it. Now the sump isn't very thick, whether I can, I've drilled out with a 5.5 so I can tap it up to a 6. Obviously 5.5 is a very small hole, took a while for the oil to come out, good hour or so, but I figure you're better off starting with a small hole and working your way up than you are going straight in with an 8 or a 10 and then realising you can't tap it out and you end up, you know, it escalates quite quickly, that's what I'm saying. So we've gone in with a 5.5 which will tap out to a 6mm. Now if there isn't enough meat in the sump to actually tap a thread into, which there probably won't be, let's be honest, sumps aren't overly thick, it's thinner than I thought it would be, but you know, whatever. What I'll probably end up doing is welding a nut to it. So find the hole, weld the nut, and then obviously I can put a 6mm bolt with a nylon washer on it just to seal it up nice and tight, and that should do the same thing. I don't want to tap threads and drill and weld and all that kind of crap. I really don't. Really don't. But I had to get that stuff out of the engine. I don't want water and oil contaminant mix sat in the engine any longer than I have to. So that's why I did it. So some people will probably be thinking, what an idiot, who drills a hole in their sump? Well, me, clearly. Because like I say, I tried everything to get that bolt out. She ain't coming out. Radiator flush as well, that was easy. Plug came right out of that one. Covered me in warm coolant, which was very refreshing. And I caught some of it in the bucket, but you know, I tried my best. So yeah, coolant flush has done its thing, oil flush has done its thing. I'm back into work on Monday, so I'll pick up a tap then. I'll have a look in there, see if I can tap out what's left of the sump. I don't think I can. It's probably going to be about 1 mil thick, and that isn't really enough to put a thread into. I don't want to put a half-hard thread into it, drive down the road, hit a speed bump, bolt falls out, and I'll leave an oil slick behind me, and the engine goes bang. That would be bad. So I probably will end up getting it down the workshop, up on the ramps, and welding a nut onto it, or just bringing the welder back here. But, you know, what a pain. What a pain. My wife had to go out, so I couldn't use the driveway, so I've had to bring the car onto the ramps in here. And driving at full speed towards your workbench with your vise on it isn't much fun, if I'm honest. But we managed it. What a pain in the ass. That's my my spare oil bucket is getting quite on the thick side now. I think it's 4.5 litres of oil it takes. So we've got some fresh oil. This is Napa Classic, which is 2050 mineral oil. That's what they recommend. I don't know. And then some antifreeze coolant. I think that needs to be diluted. So plenty of coolant, plenty of oil. I think it's 4.5 litres of oil the engine takes. And I do have some spare stuff down there again, in case it all goes terribly wrong. Yeah. So until I get something sorted out for that sump bolt, I can't really do anything else, because I can't put oil in it, I can't hold oil in it, so I can't run it up, check it, see if there's any leaks anywhere, make sure the gasket's okay. I can't do anything else than do that. Obviously I ran up to temperature earlier, I had it running for 15 minutes or so, everything seemed alright, temperature went up to the middle, stayed stable, there was no weird noises, smells or anything coming out where it should be, but of course that doesn't mean that I fixed the problem, whatever the problem was. So this video is probably getting on a bit in terms of length, so I think we'll call it there, and I'll do a part 2, I'll do a follow-up to this, just to make sure that what we've done has worked. Also I need to re-torque the head as well. Don't forget to re-torque the head now it's been run up and it's hot. Don't forget to do that. What a pain in the ass. I don't know. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Stay tuned to find out whether it's okay or it's not. I don't know.